But then the question that I came up with, or the thing that I was like trying to figure out is like, then why do I see so many sexual middles and dominants that are like so cheap and shitty about it? Like they're not being transformed. They're not losing their sense of self.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's kind of like an encouragement when all these instinctual things aren't really doing it and all this worldly stuff isn't really doing it, that you kind of have to go into your heart and into your mind in a deeper way.
There's no safe space in any of this. It all sucks. If you are a shitty person, you will use your instincts in a shitty way.
That's true. Yeah.
The big hormone Enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, 4-5 wing, 4-5-8 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with a 1, 9-7-4 trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 8-5-4 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 3-6-9 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
I mean, we were talking earlier today, and I'm a little tired, so maybe Alexandra can clarify, but we were talking about like the way in which, like basically the healthy version of the instincts versus the unhealthy versions. And we were talking about some sexual types who like, you know, sexual types and sexual middles that are acting like they really go for the real passionate stuff, unlike sexual blinds. And it was like knowing that these people were not going for the real stuff. And kind of like just that self-delusional thing about how you can even be sexually dominant and like be absolutely full of shit about your dominant instinct. And how that, like, you know, somebody projecting onto the sexual instinct might imagine that somebody with more of a sexual drive is finding a lot of people attractive. And actually, I think if you're actually in touch with your sexual drive, few people are attractive.
Yes. It's worth saying just how fucking fucked up a sexual type or sexual middle can be about the way that they're engaging their sexual instinct. I mean, it's been a huge eye-opener just typing people over the past few years and seeing real sexual types who are extremely blank, extremely uninteresting, and use their sexual instinct to hide, completely not engaging sexually in any real way with sexual partners. This is a sexual type.
Right.
And so it's like this idea that it gives you any leg up in the attraction game. It's like, no, like these, I guess I've just learned that these types are so neutral. Like a piece of shit is a piece of shit. A boring person is a boring person. It's just going to show up in this track lane of instinctual preference or whatever. But it's funny to me that people find some kind of solace in whatever stacking that they have, because I mean, I've just had first-hand experience that sexual types can be some of the most uninteresting human beings I've ever met.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. The like as if your type gives you some kind of pass or some kind of not pass is not the word, but like
advantage.
Yeah, some kind of advantage in something. Because I mean,
or some like built-in kind of thing already of just like, oh, I have
Like
to
a
try a
talent.
sexual type. I'm already,
Right.
like just like a natural flair.
I mean, I was just doing study group, and we started chapter 3, which the first part is instinctual fears and how those like co-opt the instincts basically. And you know, one girl shared like in a great self-observation about how she's probably a sexual dominant, and she said she went to Barcelona not to like see Barcelona, but to what did she say? She was like to introduce Barcelona to herself, like to show herself off and get attention. And then she didn't get attention, and she felt completely empty and completely like mission failed, and started to notice how shallow that was, you know, and you know, saying that maybe she also identified as self-pres blind, and you know, I don't know if this is self-pres blindness or not, but she said, yeah, like I couldn't. Often when people go travel, they like to like look at the architecture and the buildings and the vibe and the people and the place. And she said that was totally uninteresting to her. She was totally missing the sense of vibe and space and all about the attention thing. And then afterwards, just realized like wow, I just wasn't there. I wasn't getting the thing. And so I'm reaching for some stuff that we were referring to earlier today, but I thought it was like really interesting and worth like deflating some bubbles about. You can be a sexual type, and in fact, being a sexual type, you're most prone to deceiving yourself that you're doing something that's really getting outside your habitual boundaries and like doing something really enlivening under the feeling like this, but it's actually just doing the old pattern over again.
It can also feel like a disadvantage because you can overemphasize the signals of attraction. Like, just attraction is one aspect of a relationship, but because you're a drug addict for the high that chemistry can provide, you get one little hit of that and you make that the whole relationship. And so you don't see the other. It's like I'm overemphasizing this aspect of a relationship and I'm ignoring, the connection or maybe common values, all those other things that matter.
Being treated like a person.
Yeah. All these other things until like I'm just getting high off of this. And so everyone has a different starting point and it can create its own distortion that you're not really seeing the other person because you're just using whatever that connection to get your sexual instinct needs met. So everybody fucking sucks. All these types fucking suck. There is no comfort space. There is no escape from the fact that you're terrible. And we're using our type structures to do terrible things to ourselves and everyone else.
Right. No, where you going, baby?
She couldn't handle the terrible. She was like, "No, I'm not terrible. I'm asleep."
Alexandra says, "Shut up." From the bathroom.
Positive type escapes at the most negative point.
No, we were really saying how much in a certain way, just as you guys know, there's ways that we just fucked up parts of our lives, just thinking we were doing our dominant instincts game, and same thing with like social, where you can be social dominant, have a social instinct, but you don't know how to actually relate to people or have a relationship. And I know some mega social types who are know all these people, but they have no actual relationship, and it's no genuine connection. No one actually knows them, even though they're constantly involved in people all the time. And it's settling for this low grade level of gossip and entangled in people and reacting to people. Has nothing to do with actually being connected to anybody. And so they're just chronically alone in a real sense.
And it's becoming somebody by being associated with certain people also. Yeah. Like Alexandra.
Well, there's 9 angles.
That's the reason Alexandra's with John. Basically.
Yeah, I know, right? The social climber over here.
She can social climb all over my body. She loves to look at my body.
Clout chaser.
Look at her scurry.
Alexandra, you're just a clout chaser.
I was the best one, so
the most successful clout chaser.
Most successful one. If I heard, I was making tea, obviously, but if I heard correctly, obviously. One of the things we were talking about is the way that I hear or see people talk about their sexual instinct just feels the words, the adjectives surrounding sexual instinct is psychologically transformative, loss of self, blah, blah, blah. And those obviously have really strong implications. And there is a way that the sexual instinct does invite and require those things. But then the question that I came up with, or the thing that I was trying to figure out is then why do I see so many sexual middles and dominants that are so cheap and shitty about it? They're not being transformed. They're not losing their sense of self.
Yeah. One way to say it is it's there is a destructive aspect of the sexual instinct, and that's actually kind of a turn on. And so you stay with the destruction rather than the growth or something. Does that make sense?
I think we need to update the language a little bit because, I feel like we need to destroy any positive connotations towards just make it more neutral because what I've seen is that, the sexual drive is looking to annihilate sort of any sort of stable pattern but that can show up in such a stupid way that doesn't lead to anything.
Totally.
And so, like transformation can be just purely destructive.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, where I was kind of going with it was like, I do think that psychologically transformative and like loss of self and destructive and all of that are accurate ways to describe the sexual instinct. But then it kind of begged the question of like, why is it that not everybody uses their dominant instinct for its integral purpose? And that's kind of the two options that I feel like every instinct has with their dominant instinct. Like, we know a lot of social types that absolutely do not cultivate bonds with anybody. They just like collect people like Girl Scout badges to make themselves feel good. And the same thing with the sexual instinct is we know people that use their sexual instinct to get like ego hits without actually being transformed or without being willing to throw themselves in this sort of psychological fire. And
that
then
would be me.
That would be
guilty. Or just like people using sexual to get a sense of aliveness, like I'm just going to create a mess. I've seen sexual middles tend to do that. Like I'm just some like allure of destruction.
David.
Yeah.
and with me it's with 9 and 7, I'm and sexual middle. Well, there's more. I'm looking for more options and more possibilities of there to be some sexual juiciness everywhere. So like even a little trace, I'll keep trying to pull out of it more, to make it something and make it up or juicy or electric or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were also talking about was it was kind of this difference between using an instinct for ego versus using the instinct for one's aliveness, one's body. And then there's like, honing instinct so that it's like a good support for the body for like a inner life and spiritual work and things like that. But just that difference between keeping the body alive versus keeping the ego reinforced. It's like if you're not listening to your physical sensation, then you're projecting emotional, mental shit onto it. And the people that it's like self-pres who like works themselves out to death or like eats so finicky or weirdly that they're like fucking with themselves or like
totally
won't rest enough or they rest way too much or like sexual is like all for ego hits to like prove that I'm desirable and prove that I'm wanted. And social, just like being involved with people in some low grade sense that I'm enmeshed in something rather than actually connected. And what we're talking about, just like comparing our experiences with sexual instinct and stuff like this. And like I have a lot of remorse for having stuck in past relationships for way too long. And at the same time, one of the things that I was noticing, like we went out to a club last night, and I'm naturally attuned to attractiveness, and just how like few people are attractive. And like somebody might have nice like face or body part or something like that, but like I think just part of the sticking around in a relationship was like there isn't much out there that's actually attractive. And I think that when you separate, and I'm not trying to like somehow subtly imply I'm out of my ego whatsoever, but I'm saying that like
you are, John. You're just such a hot guy
such a hot
that
dude.
Everybody is ugly.
Well, what I mean is like when you take out like ego hitting, like hooking somebody for an ego thing, or trying to be with somebody in a way that's resolving just your ego patterns, people are pretty unappealing overall. You know what I'm saying? Like, at least from that point, like people, maybe there's like, oh, they're nice looking or they're like attractive in that like light way we say attractive or something, but like that kind of like actually like turn you on, like, whoa, what's going on here? That's that's pretty fucking rare.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worth saying. I think there was a thread in the group of like someone was talking about attachment types who go on dates and just pretend like they're into someone or can't locate if they're into someone. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, is like, hexat types are equally guilty of this shit because it's coming from it from a different angle. It's like you might, like, for example, an 8 might be attracted to someone because that person, they satisfy the need for the 8 to take up space in someone else's experience, or
Yeah.
you know, like or it's just a good deal. It's a good transaction.
Yeah, right.
You know, and there's nothing, I mean, on some level, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just as bad as I'm just kind of vaguely with this person and I'm not that interested in. So it's like all the different types have their reasons that they might stick with the partner that they're not really all that interested in from the point of view of their own type. And I don't think it's just attachment types. I mean, attachment types can have this sort of vague way that they have 4 or 5 things going on at once that can seem really confusing. But I, as an 8, can have a really fucked up reason to stay in a relationship that satisfies my own sort of leverage point of view.
Totally. Yeah.
You know? And I've stayed in some bad relationships because it was satisfying some, you know, need that had nothing to do with connection.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, it was just so clear how absolutely in the matrix we all are, and like how asleep and how, you know, like, see, even the sense of like getting flattered because so-and-so liked your tweet or whatever, or because someone is like giving you eyes or something like that is like great. But at the same time, all that is so much informed by bullshit too. And it's like, there's like so much bullshit everywhere that everybody's just slinging around at each other. That it's kind of like, you know, like you just feel backed up into a corner in terms of the artificiality in all directions. And I was like connecting that with like how, I mean, I think the planet is absolutely ruined, you know, like maybe there's some semblance of recovery, but I think like the oceans are nearly, you know, 80% plastic and stuff like this. And, you know, it's kind of like on one hand, there's this sense of absolutely like everything's bad, nothing's going to get better kind of thing. On the other hand, it's kind of like an encouragement when all these instinctual things aren't really doing it and all this worldly stuff isn't really doing it, that you kind of have to go into your heart and into your mind in a deeper way. You know, it's like, and then, I mean, I think all of us in our own ways have been really disillusioned by a lot of things. And then that disillusionment can be like a pivot point to finding something actually meaningful.
Yeah.
Trying to launch into something here. Let's see. Well, like one of the things in the Bhava chakra is that pig is at the center of the symbol is delusion or illusion, and that's the first delusion in Buddhism, which is, and I correlate it to self-pres, and part of what that means, that correlation to me, is that like I am just me and my needs and my body and my earthly self. And so in that way, like even self-pres blinds are sort of archetypally in that self-pres place of that sort of self-orientation, which, like in the case of self-pres instinct, it's a, I mean, I'm saying the obvious, but it's a, whatever your dominant instinct is, you're perceiving that there's not enough of the goodies of the commodities, and so you're stuck in that needing to get more. So that's why you have social types doing a bunch of connections that are not real relationships, and sexual types, same thing, whatever.
Yeah, it's like just the kind of I don't know, the image of like, not like a Russian nesting doll, but something similar in terms of layers and layers and layers of what you, the very like modes of perceiving the world and knowing what your needs are and and the strategies for satisfying those needs, they're all wrong. You know, they're all like really fucked up. They're all really not based in reality. And it's just interesting, like, I don't know, I guess from this instinct or just Enneagram point of view, it hits in a different way than sort of that kind of like Buddhist idea that just floats around, that all is illusion and all is suffering. It's like, yeah, you're like, yeah, okay, got it. And then you just keep doing illusion.
Yes.
Like, it's really like getting kind of specific and really gruelingly.
Right.
It's like you can see like the line between buying into something and delusion, and like tracing those little steps to and from, and just getting more and more clear about that. And yeah, it's like kind of what we came to in the study group was like, there's so much to like lose faith in. And the only thing like, yeah, the only way you really can go is either despair or mercy in a certain way.
Yeah. I when I met you summer of 2016, I was like, that was the first time that I was aware that I met a sexual type. And I was like, oh, that's what that energy feels like. So, I mean, but it's more like, this is John. It's more like John is an interesting person that I'm interested in who happens to be a sexual type. And so I thought, let me go date sexual types, and I proceeded to experience for the next 2 years some of the worst dating experiences that I've ever had.
I feel like I'm somehow indirectly responsible for so much of Emika's disaster relationship.
But it's like, oh no, these were just horrible people that happen to be sexual types.
Yes.
And so it completely demystified what the sexual instinct. I mean, of course, it was like crash.
Yeah. Yep.
It was a crash course on what the sexual instinct was and what that means in terms of what people with that instinct, first or second, are going to emphasize in a relationship, in a relational dynamic. So it just really brings it down to earth, and also sees in the ways that people use the sexual instinct to not be in a relationship or to not actually be attracted. There were so many examples of sexual types who could whip up or take a small spark that they were experiencing with me and explode that into a grand romance for a short period of time, only to, in order to get that ego hit of this person wants me, then they disappear. Yeah. So to see how, we're all trying to get our needs met, and as a sexual type, you're overemphasizing, is this person hooked into me or not? And just to see that for what it is in horrible people, it's like, oh, it's just an instinct. It has there's no value in it in of itself. And you're really, if you're in a relationship with someone, it's really about that person. They're not interesting because they have sexual. It's just, that's the instinct that they're going to use to get certain needs met. And we type a lot of people who are in some way angling to have sexual in their stacking. And I just wish they would understand that you're not missing out on anything. Like whatever you think is going to happen. I mean, of course, there is a certain perspective that's needed if that's your last instinct, but it's not going to give you the awesome whatever that you think it's going to give you.
Right.
It's not going to make you cooler. It's not going to make you have better sex.
Right.
I've had some frigid sex with sexual types.
Yeah.
So if you've been wondering about what it's like to fuck a sexual type, it might still suck.
Yeah, I want to try out the sexual middles.
They're still just as guilty. Right? Fuck them. Yeah. You got that sexual middle arrogance. No, y'all suck too. You're all just huge sluts.
It's going to take you a while to convince me.
There's no safe space in any of this. It all sucks. If you are a shitty person, you will use your instincts in a shitty way.
That's
true. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's all fresh in my mind because it was like a good study group session because we were the instinctual fears of, self-pres, fear of scarcity and harm, sexual fear of being undesirable and sexually overlooked, and then social, the fear of being ostracized and abandoned. That we have, no matter what our stacking is, all three of those fears are active in us. We're just more or less reacting to and managing one of those fears. And so if you're sexual, social, self-pres, you're going to be anxious about being undesirable, but you're also going to be anxious about scarcity and harm. The way you're going to try to manage your fear of scarcity and harm is to try to be more desirable and sexually appealing. And it's like we have all that shit in us.
Yeah. I was thinking that we should do, with here and in DAA, just talk about how these types like trifix and the stackings, they're all, it's from the perspective of the dominant instinct. So if I'm doing self-pres or social, it is through the lens of sexual that I'm going to try to get those needs met, unless I'm actually doing the work to go directly to that instinct. And same thing with my 5 fix, that it's from the perspective of 8 that I'm doing my 5-fix. So someone, a 9 or a 1 who has a 5-fix is going to be going to their head center through the perspective of their core type. And so that sort of nesting quality of the instincts and the types, that if you're a sexual type, that when I do self-pres, it's like, how do I inject some kind of activating interesting hookness that people would want to buy? Like, how do I make money in a way that satisfies my sexual instinct? And without actually just going to self-pres and just meeting people's needs that way and just making money like any normal self-pres person would do. Like, you're doing it through the sexual instinct, which is a huge handicap, which because it has to be interesting to me, which that's not what people need when they're trying to get their self-pres needs met. So it's like looking at how I'm doing social through the sexual instinct. You know, you're using sexual approaches to meet social needs, and there is kind of like a social within sexual. And so when you go to social, I'm doing it from this, you know, trying to provoke some kind of annihilation or before after for people or something like that. That's not really social either. So it's an interesting way to look at how we're just all in a nested way approaching our blind spots, you know, through the dominant instinct, or even the secondary instinct through the dominant instinct.
Right. Like, I mean, all the self-pres I do is purely because it somehow enhances my sexual, like, I work out or I eat well, or I try to move my body some. But like, Alexandra had like a 401k from an old job she was at, and she like brought that up, and I was like, what is a 401k? You know, like, no sense of preserving myself. It's all like to maintain the vehicle. And then, I mean, we've had that joke of your blind spot's really your dominant instinct, because you're, you know, like trying to find somebody that really chooses me and sees me and wants me because I'm attractive. You know, because I'm juicy and stuff.
Yeah.
This is kind of taking it in a different direction, but something that I've been thinking about, I've been having a lot of conversations about like, or observing conversations that usually have to do with some kind of like compatibility formula. And I know that we've talked about like polarities and, you know, how you need like a good amount of polarity, but also a good amount of resonance so that the polarity is not unstable.
Yeah.
You know, and all of that's good. But I guess like through like observing conversations like this and taking part in conversations like this, like when I use astrology, like in synastry or, just any kind of like compatibility modality, it all comes down, like the pattern, the freaking pattern, the app.
Yeah.
It's like, it's very fun and it's great and everything. But like, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is if I use the pattern as an example, it can just be like a projection machine. Absolutely a projection machine. You can have like a great sort of like test result between you and another person on the pattern then, and it turns out that that relationship or that interaction, that dynamic sucks.
Yep.
And in other ways, you can have like one that invites a lot more struggle, or not invites, but like predicts a lot more struggle and a lot more tension, but there's actually a lot more, I don't know, a lot more harmony or like compatibility or just like something that works within it. So I guess what I'm getting at is like, the way that I see astrology is like the compatibility that can come out in synastry really is like the last thing to look at, because every individual person first needs to get through the hurdles of their own chart.
Yeah.
So like I can be compatible with John, and we are. All of our synastry is really good. All of our like planet to planet stuff is really good. Pattern shit was really good, but then it's still stuff like if John's not working on his stuff as like a sexual 4 and I'm not working on my stuff as a social 9, then compatibility or not, we're not going to work. And so it's kind of the same thing with the Enneagram. Like I've been seeing like what's going to work. Maybe I'll try like a sexual type next, or maybe you should go for a social blind, or maybe you should go for like a sexual middle or something like that. And it's like the formula is not going to work.
Yep.
Because you're really just trying to find sleeping compatibility with somebody instead of like an awake meeting.
Yeah. That hits real close to home. I was thinking after the rejection call we did with Courtney that I realized that my obsession with attraction, or trying to build a system around or formulate a system around how people are attracted to each other, is yet another way that I've put like a rejection overlay on attraction, because it's sort of like saying, she's into me because I look like her dad, or I fit this archetype that she's into. And if it doesn't work, it's because there was something missing between that mismatch between our attraction map. So it's keeping it away from me. The more I focus, the more I'm being more separate from the person. I'm like an outside like lens on the dynamic where I'm not there. I'm just watching two people, me in the picture. So I can sort of like separate myself from what's going on.
It's an objectification thing too.
Yeah, I was going to say that it actually takes out free will.
Yeah.
By just looking at will this system work with this system? Cool. Then we can both just not really be here, and it'll still be functional without causing more disruption.
Right. It was just a way to abstract a person to their parts.
Yeah.
And to see a failure in terms of that abstraction. And so I started to realize that, I had instances where on paper it looked like it was a great match and it was still an abject failure. And I've had instances where I didn't see it coming, but there was some unexpected chemistry that came about from something that didn't seem like it would work. And so I don't have that obsession anymore because I know it doesn't fucking matter. Like there's so much unpredictable stuff when two people get together. I mean, everything could be right on paper, but if someone is not ready to be in a relationship with you, regardless of how well of a match, and I've experienced that, they're not ready for any sort of heart-to-heart connection, it's never going to happen. Or they have some sort of mental illness or whatever. It's never going to happen. So I've learned the hard way that this abstraction of attraction is just another way for me to separate myself from dealing with human beings as human beings.
Yeah, I mean, that goes further with again, not to keep referencing what we did today, but it was pretty rich. The call was ways I try to label what the personality does in response to those instinctual fears is for fear of scarcity and harm, for self-prize goes into habit. And I don't just mean routines, I do this every morning, but turning everything into kind of automatic.
Yeah.
Stabilizing, and that means even your patterns of thinking and feeling and behaving. Everything is kind of stems from that self-prize wanting to stabilize and just lock down on what I've got. And then, both in terms of actual resources, but also internally as an identity, lock down on my identity to keep doing the same things. And then sexual is objectification, which is objectifying oneself and other people. And, I think it's, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a little easier to sometimes see when you're objectifying someone else. Because you're just I'm, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of easier. But harder to see when you're objectifying yourself, because it's the bounds of what personhood means are much vaguer. And then for social, I call it positioning, where it's basically you're not relating to people in the present moment, but from a emotional mental template that you're trying to get the present circumstance to conform to, whether you're above everybody because you're so great and really valuable, so everybody should belong, or want you to belong and want to connect with you, or I'm lower than everybody and I'm a victim, or I'm a, you don't know how bad I've got it, or you guys are against me. It's another just position to have. It's creating an orientation to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's what you're speaking to with that objectification thing, where it's we're all playing these versions of this out on each other and ourselves. And I don't know, they're all just collapsing around just being in touch with the actual felt sense of the instinct.
Mm-hmm.
They're all what happens when we're a little dissociated from the in the moment thing, because it's putting old emotional stuff, old emotional patterns into it to make it alive.
Yeah. Even as a sexual type, you could, or anyone in any relationship could just make a mental framework of what they think they're actually experiencing and just hold on to that.
Yeah.
Versus what's actually happening. Even the honeymoon stage is an example of that. Of you've projected something on someone and it's so strong that it supersedes maybe what you're experiencing, and you try to hold on to that feeling as it starts to fade away. Just actually coming back to connecting with the person in front of you and what's actually happening now. It's hard because there's a possibility that what you experience in the moment could go one or two different ways. So it's easier to default to fantasy, or to default to this is what I want to happen, or what I want to make happen, or this is what it used to be, and that's what, that kind of thing.
Another version of all this is like pursuing attractions or relationships or life circumstances that you're really not that into, but it's kind of like a settling thing, or like what I can get kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So you're like not really in it, but you're like convinced yourself that this is all you can get, so you stay involved in bullshit. Sure. And so like, yeah, it's like, maybe you're in a relationship you don't actually really feel that good about, but it's what I can get. Or especially like, people just like start with these like dumb, very shallow, very like, I ended up going through this wormhole where on my Facebook account, I all of a sudden got all these people from high school that I have not thought about for a second coming up as suggested friends or something.
Oh, okay. Ugh.
And I was like, oh my God, like I have a game I play with my friends Colleen and Mary where we text each other the names of somebody that just has not crossed a brain cell. And because we all went to high school together, and like it's amazing how absolutely forgettable. We didn't have like a big class or something, but how absolutely forgettable some people were. And then we're like, what? And so, and people who had even big personalities at the time, left no mark. So, man, where am I going with this? I got into this thing where I was just like looking at all these people, and I don't know, just like the ways that people can occupy themselves with nonsense and nothing and nobodies. And like, remember, just like how high school people, like, there's a lot of people that just like never actually have a friend in their life, even though they're involved in a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's just wild. Like, it was just like, it was such a mind fuck to see that. And this kind of like go through some of these people and just, anyway, I don't know why that was connected, but it somehow is in my brain.
I think you were going with like all the different ways we convince ourselves to stay in things and settle for things, and like people are just involving themselves in things that don't mean anything to them at the time.
And it's like what I said earlier about like how little you might be attracted to. It doesn't mean you're ugly or something like that, or something's wrong with you, but just like, it's like how little is real in the world.
Yeah.
And like what I'll see too is like people engaging in either like romantic relationships or friendships or something like that. And it's like they're wanting the higher quality thing. Like I want like a real connection or like a real solid relationship. But it's sort of like with the soul intercourse episodes where like, it was like you gotta kind of, you can't play the dumb game and hope for like something real to come by.
Yeah.
You gotta like actually step up to the real thing and risk maybe not getting it. Yeah. But like at least living in the energy level, so to speak, if you want it, because you're not gonna like the like if you keep just like lowering your standards, it's gonna attract the flies. What?
Yeah.
Yep.
Putting
it's
shit out there.
It's kind of like hoping for better. Like I'm gonna start with this dumb shit and hope it becomes better, and that doesn't work.
No,
it's like you have to actually raise your expectation and keep it there to attract someone who's also looking for the same thing, or even bring someone up to that level where they're like, oh shit, I've wanted this and I haven't, met someone who's wanting the same thing. I mean, I had to go through that of, all right, I want a real heart connection with somebody, and most people aren't. I mean, 99% of people aren't there. So that means I'm going to look like a fool for a while, because you're going to put yourself out there. Someone might think you're being too thirsty or being too, pathetic or whatever the fuck, or too much.
Yeah, too much.
Which I definitely experienced a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Which is disheartening. But at the end of the day, it's like, I also recognize that, man, nothing felt more alive. Nothing felt more real than actually like letting somebody know how I felt, not from a place of I'm going to try to do this or this. It was like from like a real, it's really risky, but I was like, just the fact of doing that felt like this is what living is. Like I actually was real in this connection.
Fuck yeah.
And I was like, I'll never go back. I can't go back, because just trying to protect your heart is just, it doesn't matter if it works. The actual activating or being in your heart is a really cool thing. once you can get there.
Right.
One thing I was going to bring up too is my elements thing and that association with the instincts, you know, self-pres is earth, social is air, and sexual is fire and water. And, you know, if we're talking about demystifying sexual, I think that part of why this is always going to come up, this thing around this idealization of sexual, is because everybody has, this is a nineism here, right? But everybody has this elemental, archetypal association actually with the sexual instinct, deeply unconsciously or whatever, you know, with fire and heat and water, juicy, you know what I mean? All of that kind of stuff. And so part of what we're battling in trying to demystify sexual is those associations. And I don't know what the antidote is, but I mean, it's difficult to get around that. I mean, the antidote is somewhat what we're already saying here, which is a connection to the heart and presence and things like that. But, you know, it's difficult when you've got that kind of underlying association. I mean, earth is just this fucking dull thud thump of earth, right? That's not moving, right? So it is kind of dull, right? And air, you can't see it, right? So, you know what I mean? Things like that. So, yeah. So that's, again, I'm bringing it up partly as something to, I don't know, just hold as a thought. Not that we'll have answers for it now, but that's part of what we're battling is that, I think.
I was a friend turned me on to like giving Freud another look, like because I mean, first of all, it's very fashionable for people to shit on Freud without having ever understood anything about Freud.
Okay.
And how, you know, everything in modern psychology is like rooted in Freud, like everything, you know, and it's like, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, Freud or Jung or whatever, but yeah, people
Isn't
who
he
don't.
the first modern person to come up with I don't know, just have the idea that there is a subconscious? I mean,
right,
that's rather huge.
Right, just that we're that we're ruled by the unconscious. And you know, I mean, just brilliance. Anyway,
right.
You know, he talks about the thanatos, the death drive, and he puts that in contrast to a kind of eros or libido. But and I think like what I'm kind of getting at is that there is some kind of conflation with eros and sexual instinct in a certain way that does make sense. At the same time,
it's where we get the word erotic, eros.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like you know, like in a conversation, like from that point of view of eros, like this is sexual. Like just that we're conversing, we're mixing and meeting and blending in a certain way, right? And so that's like an eros creative drive. And I think that maybe like the sexual instinct can capture the part of eros that is about some kind of boundary overcoming. But, you know, like self-pres is eros and social is eros. And so I think sometimes there is a relationship between sexuality and eros in a certain way. And there's a little bit of distinction as well. And I think a lot of times, my experience of when people are very identified with being a sexual type when they're definitely not a sexual type, and why they have a hard time being talked out of whatever they're identified with, sexual type, being identified with sexual type, is feeling like either they feel like they've got a lot of eros and then somehow I'm trying to deny that to them, or they feel like they don't have eros and I'm calling them out on that or something like that. But I think that that's like a lot of the thing. But what we're getting at too is that like you can be sexual dominant and absolutely have no eros, like none at all.
I mean, it's been really cool to see that. I mean, I can remember a couple years ago when the group was new and there were some people that were tackling the idea that they could be sexual blind, and there was someone that we had typed as sexual first who was very plain and didn't really seem very interesting. And so this other person who was sexual blind was like, why is this person sexual? Yeah, I'm way more interesting.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, like it was a big thread, and it was just sort of like getting at, that's the whole point, that this is not a statement on your personhood or your ability to be sexually alluring, because look, there are sexual types who aren't very alluring at all. It's something that's always going to keep happening. I had a call recently with a sexual blind person who said he really took a lot from our DAA calls, because he realized that all the interesting people, or people that he thought were interesting, were sexual blind. That it really demystified sexual for him, because he could see it for what it was, and it's like, it has nothing to do with interestingness, actually. And that's hopefully what making the Enneagram come alive can do for people. It's like, you've got to look at the person and their heart, and that's what you're really connecting to. Just because you have sexual or you don't, doesn't say anything about your ability to be sexually alluring. Those of us who are interesting because we're actually interesting people.
Right.
No,
Not because of, I've met people with my same stacking or close to my same trifix who are pretty fucking boring.
Yeah. And I mean, I've known Alexandra as like absolute type twins.
Yeah.
And absolutely, this is no juice.
Yep.
And there's my juicy fruit right here.
It's because of her 5-wing on her 6 fix.
Oh, right.
That's the only reason I'm
That's why.
Right, absolutely.
Just that one thing.
Yeah.
Subwing.
I got 5 and 4 somewhere. Haha.
She's got like like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
That's
4
why.
5 subwing on her 6-5.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something else about this idealization thing that was interesting. I guess, it's to what we're speaking to. It's like by idealizing another type or trifix or something like that, you're still kind of like looking to the flat world to like give you something or to feel like the flat world stole something from you that you like if you're trying to identify with like let's say you're sexual blind and you're like, oh, I'm a sexual type, and it's like giving you a sense of something. It's like you're still looking in the wrong place for something. You're still like rearranging flat world to try to find something. And it's like, we're all missing eros unless we're actually in touch with something real in us. And like, I keep referencing these study groups, but it's just super fresh. We've been using the ray of creation levels as a thing, and I think I've explained on the podcast. I know I've explained to you guys, but I don't know in the podcast, just like World 96 versus World 48 versus World 24. And don't worry about the numbers, but it's like the idea is more conditions. And so like World 96 is where most of us are, which is the delusional world, which is like in religious language, hell. Doesn't necessarily mean you're miserable all the time, but you're very, very asleep and delusional and lost in Maya, right? And then World 48 is just getting into like a quote normal world, meaning cause and effect, not delusional. You're like your instincts are just actually taking care of their body instead of taking care of like reinforcing ego. World 24 is like the result of inner work where it's like you're sensitive and you're really in touch with your heart, you're really in touch with your mind, you're really in touch with your body. But to get from 96 to 48, just to get into like the normal actual world is an enormous adjustment. And so it's like people will be in this like 96 space to be like, oh, I want that, and like I'm a sexual type or I'm not a sexual type or whatever it might be, or like this fix or whatever. And it's like it's like reaching through garbage to try to find like a diamond or something like that. You know what I mean? And it's like just the faster you can get rid of your idealizations about a certain type, the more you can work on your fucking type and just work your kinks out.
The other thing that people say about Alexandra is that she's now interesting because she's become your girlfriend. And interestingness has transferred itself from John to Alexandra.
No, I mean, that's true.
Wow. Yeah, no, I've heard that too. I've read that too. Fuck yourselves.
She was an empty space before.
Them, bitch.
An empty space before she met John, and now she's become a person.
I mean, Alexandra and I knew each other through chats for a while before we were together, like over a year. And I was just always, I mean, I in retrospect, it's really funny. I would always tell my ex, like, wow, Alexandra is like so smart. She's so funny. I would just say stuff like, she needs to be on the podcast more. Wow, she was so great on the podcast. Like, I think she's such a great representative. Not like, I would just like all the time. Like, I was always, you know, like I've told you guys, but like on those chats where you can like react to people's comments, I'd always like try to make jokes and be like, did she like it? Did she like it? Did she heart it? Did she like it? Did she like it? She didn't. She like Emika's joke? She like David's joke? Like, you know, what, you know, so yeah, so no, she was she's always been super juicy.
Sexual blind 9, baby.
Sexual blind 9.
And it's worth people try to get so much meaning from this system, or not just this system, any typology. And it's like, man, there's just so many fucking layers that make up who you are. Like, I was born in Nigeria, and my family moved here when I was 11. So there's this sort of like thing of always having to contend with a different culture, and you know, that can make someone interesting.
Right.
You know, just coming from a different background, or there's just so many different layers that I'm not a white person. And this is predominantly white country. There's so many different layers to people that people won't come to the Enneagram trying to find meaning and find a sense of identity in this system. And I mean, I guess people tend to do that with all kinds of things, politics, religion. And this can become a type of religion for people, where it's like, I'm trying to figure out who I am. And I think on some level I was doing that with the Enneagram. I had a quarter life crisis. My cocky ass was like, I'm not rich at 25. What's wrong with me? Let me go figure out what's wrong with my personality. That was an aspect of it.
Now Emika's super rich.
I'm still broke.
Dark arts money.
Still broke. But it's like trying to look for an answer within the system, and I had to this system destroyed me, and it destroyed any notion that my type, my instincts, or anything I could use any of that to orchestrate some kind of like, Emika is the greatest, you know, whatever. Like, it destroyed it just saw like how shitty I was, that I myself, I have to develop me, that my type or my instincts or any of these things don't give me any inherent advantages. It's just showing me in what ways that I'm fucked up. But it's like, it's development of one's own heart, one's own character, that has nothing to do with any of these things. You're just going to use these types to fuck yourself up, and then and justify it to yourself. And so it can be like disheartening for people when people actually get to really see the real Enneagram, get to really see themselves, and see that there is no escape hatch, there is no security blanket. You actually have to become a better version of yourself, independent of whatever type you might be. And that's like, oh shit, I'm back to where I was. Right. I'm terrible, and I have to get better. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, not to just because like 4 is sort of underrepresented in general in the population. It's like, I think what 4 does, like, of all the shitty things 4s can be and do, I do think that one of the, especially like for tech, I guess, like 4 is a part of us that like sort of recognizes that our own hearts are like just unique inherently, like that we inherently have something that's going to be just original and unique that's going to come out of us if we get to know ourselves. And, you know, 4s do it in all these fucked up sideways, they get it wrong. But I don't know, I could imagine like listening to this and we're just like being like everything, like there's no, I don't know the word I'm trying to find, but yeah, it's
there's
like,
no hope.
I think, yeah, it's like there's like no hope. There's like the anxiety of like, well, I think I suck. I think my personality type sucks. I think, you know, it's like, what is it? And it's like, I mean, it's like we said earlier, it's like your only real choice is to go into your actual heart, mind, and body and like be courageous enough to discover what's there, even if it puts your usual order of life or instinctual resources at risk. Like, you know, like we're talking about shitty social relationships, and it's like you're only going to find a real social relationship when you can have the courage to detach a little bit from your shitty ones, you know, and that might mean not finding a good relationship for a long time, but it's kind of like you have to separate something to make room for something else.
Yeah.
And I guess it's worth saying that even the types, this idea that only attachment types are looking to play these identification games with the types, and I think everyone's doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
I was going to say earlier that, this way that we're all kind of settling, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess what I heard you guys say, that someone said that it's the attachment types that like settle. I think the wording was different, but it was like that, I don't know, that like general idea that it's attachment types that like reach lower to give themselves some sort of like,
or don't know what they're attracted to.
Oh, don't know what, okay. Don't know. Yeah. Don't know their like location or what it is that they're looking for or whatever. So I do think that if we go back to like the way that people can use their dominant instinct in like an integral way or in like a cheap way, I think everybody, because how do I say this? There is abundance, but there is a lot of scarcity, and you have to, this is kind of going along with what we're saying, like if you are waiting for something real, you do have to go without for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe this is giving people too much credit, but I do think people do want something real, but then they give up or they burn out or they get lonely or something like that. And then they hold on to something like cheap and lower in the meantime, but then they get comfortable. Their personality gets comfortable with this like lower, cheap in the meantime thing that they never outgrow it. And so I guess where I'm going with that is that like, it is not just attachment types that do that. I think everybody does that, and they do it in the way of their type.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen 7s reach low because it's like just like an easy fun fix.
Right.
And I'm sure that there are ways that 8s can reach low because they have like a tangible role that they can play for this person that doesn't really do anything for them.
Yep.
And like 4s will reach low. I don't know, John, how do you reach low? 4s
Suffering.
reach low.
Whatever gives him the most suffering.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that it's like whatever makes them special by default,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like these ways that we cheat ourselves out of the depth and the vitality of what we're wanting, regardless of our instinct.
That comes back to my elemental thing. If you go sort of another layer deeper into that elemental ecosystem is, and what I was talking about, the contrast of earth and fire and that kind of thing, is that if you actually, it sort of relates to, again, presence and things like that, but every atom ultimately of air and earth or anything is a fire. There is an atomic electricity in it. There's something, I'm not sure where it comes from, but it's something called, I know it as the Fohat. I'm not sure what language that's from, but there's other words for it in different cultures and things, but it's the it's the life force that is the universe. It's the fire that is in every single atom and subatomic particle. And so, point being that, again, going back to demystifying sexual, for example, if you were to slow down, and come into yourself, you would find that vitality in everything, and that aliveness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that exactly speaks to why there are some people, we've had some people in the group that are very obviously speaking about a social instinct with self-pres in the middle, but they think they're speaking about sexual. They're talking about like the depth and the romanticism and the vitality and the passion that comes from their dominant instinct, absolutely only attributing that kind of potency to a sexual instinct.
That's right.
Yeah. It's like, what is sexual if you realize that all the instincts have potency?
Yeah.
They have passion. It's like once you start stripping all this stuff away, it's like, then there's really nothing to idealize anymore. And in a lot of ways, then the Enneagram can become a disappointing thing because you get left with just you.
Yeah.
There's nothing to hang your hat on anymore.
Yes.
There's your core type is terrible. Your fixes don't help you out. And sexual's not this amazing thing that you thought it was. All the instincts have passion. It's like, well, I guess I gotta actually do better and be a better person and get in touch with my heart and all that difficult stuff that I didn't want to do anyway.
Having a 5 wing on my 6 fix is not what makes me interesting. I guess it's everything else.
And you've got a 4 wing on your 3.
I know. I'm just shining beacon.
It's our overlay.
You're Puerto Rican. Everybody needs to be Puerto Rican.
That's right. That's the one. That's my crowning jewel.
Yeah, it's your hair. It's your hair. Everyone should take classes and get Alexandra's hair.
You're ethnic.
What did you? Yeah. What is that episode you guys did? I think you guys did by yourself, where you were promoting the astrology, and you guys talked about like my floof channeling the powers of the universe or something like that.
The curls reach out in all directions and bring in the cosmic
the answers.
energies from all directions.
It's like people are like grasping for straws to find reasons for whatever it is, and not like wanting to just say, oh, that person is just a person existing. It's not, oh, he thinks it's cool or this, or they're the cool kids, or it's a cult, or like just reaching for all these, like, you know, same thing people are doing with types, like, oh, it's because of this instinct or because of this type. No, it's just you.
Right. Well, it's like, I mean, imagine if some of these people that might be saying that, like, oh, Alexandra's only interesting because of her, you know, overlay subwing, you know, proximity to John or whatever it is.
I've already heard that I'm already not the most basic because I'm social self-pres instead of self-pres social. I'm like, Jesus, you guys are so uncreative with your own like self-images.
Do you know someone said something that, or left a comment to say, why does Nancy seem so much more Bermuda than Alexandra? And I was like, so they're alluding to,
what typologically is making her that way?
Well, they're just alluding to, Alexandra and Nancy about Bermudas, but Alexandra seems less of a Bermuda than Nancy, i.e. Bermuda being more
should be boring
or not, you know, or, you know, just
that's
whatever.
Rude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they're different people. Bermuda, whatever, doesn't explain your personhood totally.
No.
Yeah, it's also offensive that to be less Bermuda would mean that I would be more interesting. Excuse me, I'm interesting because I'm a Bermuda.
She's my Bermuda queen.
Yeah.
She is the triangle incarnate.
We get lost in the mystery.
Me too, baby. Me too.
What I was saying is, like, you know, it's kind of like people have to make up these sort of dumb bullshit things, because if it's like, wow, Alexandra, for example, is a very interesting person, and she's like a very common type that might be my type or somebody else's type. It's like, oh, if I'm lame, it's because I'm lame. It's not like I want to blame my type or something.
Right.
You know, like, oh no, if you're, you know, it's like you can be any type and fucking lame, and you can be any type and fucking interesting and cool.
Yeah.
And so that's not a fucking excuse. If you just you're just fucking lame. Stop making up some shit and do something about it.
Like, if your sexual life sucks, it's not because you're sexual blind. It's because you're shitty at sex or whatever. Like,
you're attracted to. You're not. You're hiding from who you're really attracted to.
Yes, that's
which would somehow challenge your self-image or your comfort zone or your social situation or whatever that is.
You know, it's like once upon a time, I was a virgin. And I didn't know what the fuck I was doing sexually. Like, I didn't come out of the womb as a sexual type. I'm just a sex machine.
Mac Daddy.
Immediately, I just know how to get girls. If you look at photos of me in high school, I was wearing polo shirts, khakis, and sandals with white socks.
Really?
Yeah.
John, remember that one picture of Emeka where he's got his head down like this?
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Horrible
I also
style.
know of another
Line to
picture
Emeka.
with Emeka where he's like it seems like you're out playing sports or something, and you got a crown of flowers.
Oh, yeah. I posted that to be phototyped a long time ago. But I'm like,
this one,
people look at my hair now and are like, oh, he's so interesting. Like, dude, go back 10 years, go back 15 years. Like, I looked pretty frumpy back then. So what the fuck? You know, I've given out some horrible fucking, some horrible sex. So I've bombed with many a women. So 854 sexual, not helping out at all.
Yeah, we've all been the person that somebody else like experience and was like, nah. That was not doing that again.
It's like, imagine being a sexual type and imagining like, oh, you would be somehow blessed with some amazing seduction skills. It's like, where are these seduction skills? Please help me figure, like, where are these, like, abilities to seduce and attract women that I'm supposed to have, that these people like imagine that they would suddenly have.
It's like, to your point about like, you might lose interest in the Enneagram because you have nowhere to hang your hat. It's like, it's like, that's the dividing of the waters between who's fucking serious about the Enneagram, about inner life and all this other stuff, and who's just using it as an ego game. And it's the same thing with like, all right, like, being a sexual type does not make you better sexually, but it's like, are you willing, whether you're sexual type or just interested in your sexual instinct in general, to look into what it means to be a full person in a sexual way? It doesn't matter what your fucking instinct is, but it's like that, like, though, and to do that requires confronting things about yourself, like whether it's insecurities or ways you don't measure up or whatever. And so, like, what is actually like a real impulse, and what's just, I'm looking to shuffle the deck of the Titanic as it goes down. It's like, in the Gurdjieff work, there's this concept of magnetic center, which it's like within the emotional center, and it's this, and you don't have to take it's like something to maybe not take literally, but there's something to it where you're exposed to certain influences that are like secondary influences from, like, quote unquote real influences, and it's like following a certain smell or thread of like something real. And you have to developing a magnetic center and following the magnetic center will put you in touch with influences that are more vibrant or connected to something real. And it's like, at any time, like, you can max out on your magnetic center. Like, having a little magnetic center is not gonna get you anywhere. But it's like, you keep building that. It's like a metaphor for speaking for that real desire to get outside of just the ego building project, which 99.999% of everybody's experience, not only people, but also 99.999% of those people's experience. Like, 99% of people are only looking to build their ego. And the people that are looking for more, even 99% of those people's experience is ego building itself too.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's you have to, like, just keep pulling that thread, and the only kind of faith required is being dissatisfied with business as usual. Like, you have to, like, really keep your dissatisfaction close and really feel like how empty and not getting you what you want and compromising and degrading all this shit is.
Yeah.
Then you might get thirsty for something that's not usual.
Yeah.
Sometimes things just have to burn out, and you get tired of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
That's why people try to understand, like, what is the purpose of our group or podcast, and why do we do all this not a 4 or not a type bullshit. And somebody made a comment in the group that I thought, a social type that brought context to that, to say that, some people think that it's just a marketing campaign or just a display of our own arrogance. And this person made a comment saying that this was a way to filter out those people who are looking to be coddled and validated by the Enneagram. Yeah. And I was like, that is what the purpose is, is if you are so in your feelings about the possibility of not being the type that you thought you are, you are using the Enneagram to play ego games. Yeah. And until you stop using the Enneagram to play ego games, you will never care enough to actually learn what the Enneagram is trying to say about these types. And so to get to burn through that rage or that discomfort and that emotional pain of realizing that what you thought wasn't there, that the Enneagram isn't going to give you that validation that you thought, is the only gateway to get to the other side of actually getting to something real. Totally. And it's worth pissing off as many people in order to get those few people who, and our group is so potent because of that. Yeah. Because the people who stick around are the people who actually give a fuck about getting somewhere with this stuff. So it was a really good, contextual way to look at, that this does have a purpose. Because if you can't get through the disappointment that the Enneagram isn't going to validate your ego, you're never going to get anywhere with this stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Big part of getting anywhere too, though, is, besides any kind of practice, is just observing yourself more and more and more, and just seeing how you're doing your type and your instincts. I mean, I'm saying the obvious, but just the more you see it, I guess part of my point is, it's not necessarily that our group has a bunch of people that are doing a whole lot of active, practices or something.
Right.
But they're getting more and more familiar with self-observation and observing others, doing these patterns, and it goes and it becomes you become a more finely tuned instrument to be able to see all of these patterns and how subtle they are and how they're everywhere, and you're saturated in it, and everybody is.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Well, I'll say with my own experience, I was saying this to a friend recently, and I was telling John this morning too, is I feel like I learned the majority of the Enneagram through observing everybody.
Yeah.
I learned the types or whatever, but still there's the textbook information, there's just the kind of head type data that I got, and absorbed that in, but it was seeing it in action and seeing it play out. And I think both as an attachment type and as a triple attachment person, it was almost like I wasn't going to understand myself until I saw it externally.
Yeah.
So it was I'm watching this person be some passive aggressive 9. I'm watching that girl just spin out in 6 nonsense. I'm watching this person, just toxic social behavior. And then that's when I'm able to see, seeing it externally first was how I was able to be fuck, I do that. I do that too, and it's just this horrifying thing. And then even that, recognizing it in myself has given me information on how to observe in a more finely tuned way as well. Because now it's this internal, external cycle of you're doing that thing that I do, which means I do this thing, which means I can call that out even more clearly.
Yeah.
Which is, this positive, stripping feedback loop that is horrible, but really helpful. It's been really beneficial.
The thing that, or John, did you have something?
Go for it, yeah.
The thing that I didn't realize would happen as a result of centering our group around typing, and specifically not just people throwing out guesses, but people going through the practice of making a video and collages, is that people actually get to see themselves for the first time. Making a video and watching yourself, I've gone through this myself, is oh shit, I didn't know that that's the way that I come across. Or how many times have you you think you're this way in your head, I relate to this in my head, but actually watching yourself and then other people watching you and mirroring back to you certain things, oh shit, I didn't realize I was doing that. And so what we've done inadvertently is create a group around self-observation and just observing types play out in other people. And so people have just gotten really good at observing and making distinctions. That practice of not only seeing yourself, but seeing others do their type. People are learning the Enneagram just as like you're saying. I mean, because Alexandra, you've learned so much, and you're really good at this shit after what? How many years? 2-3 years?
2019.
So it's
that's really fast. I mean, that's super accelerated.
The only way that's possible is if you have real life examples of people that what their type is, and just to see how powerful that is. Because it took me how many 15, 16 years to get where I'm at, but in 3 years, someone can get there so much faster if they have real examples to observe.
I mean, it's to the point. I mean, I tell Alexandra, I think you're better at the Enneagram than me. And I'll tell her, there are things that I'm, struggling with to, clarify, and I'll just ask her, to find language or something. And, I always tell people naturally it takes people at least 3 years to just get what the Enneagram is. And so Alexandra's got it. And so, thank God for her 5-wing on her 6-bit sub-wing 4-5 or whatever.
Phew! If it was a 7-wing, we'd all be gone.
No chance. You wouldn't have any abilities.
But I was going to add to David's point about observation. Another distinction is that there's a difference between quote, knowing something about yourself and then observing.
Yeah.
Where knowing something about yourself is like something you passively absorbed through friction and through things happening, and that is often not very reliable. Like you make up little stories about why things are the way they are, and
true.
But then there's observation, which is an active attention. You're actively observing. So like, Alexandra noticing, like, she's not just going, oh, I know I can spin out in a 6-way, and not just see somebody spinning out in a 6-way, but sometimes she can be like, I'm in the middle of spinning out in a 6-way. And she articulates, I mean, this...
horrible place to be. The line to 6 specifically. I like my 6 fix, but the line is hell on earth.
What she described was like being able to, in the mental center, following almost every possibility to its conclusion. And that's not how I think at all. So when I try to like soothe her 6 fix, I do a terrible job. I try to do it in a 5-ish way where I'm like, this is everything I'm seeing. And she's like, no, but that's not that, whatever.
Yeah.
And, I was joking that I'm Doctor Strange in the multiverse of madness. Because it's like all these different perspectives that I like was overwhelming. But like that ability to articulate that as like in the act of, oh, this is what it is. It's not just, oh, I know I have a 6 fix and sometimes it makes me feel anxious. It's like it is going all the way down the line with these possibilities. Other people don't do that necessarily. And I don't think that way. I have a vision and then I fixate on the specific vision, and it takes a lot for me to uncouple the vision from what I think is real. And I don't know how 7 fixes do it. David, you can tell us, but it's like, but that capacity, that's really interesting. Like, you wouldn't be, it's a different thing than just knowing I have a 6 fix, and this is what 6 fixers do. It's like observing in real time. This is the reality of it.
Yeah. Like I one thing I really like about what we're doing with the group is that we are unspooling the Enneagram, like giving it real language. So it's not just to say, oh, I think someone's a 4. It's now giving 4 language in that this is a frustration image type in the heart center. Like to actually see what that's like, or even like 6 spinning out or ping-ponging between extremes. Like giving real language so people can experience what these types are and observe them not only in other people but in themselves. And that's when the Enneagram becomes not just some abstract system that we can play ego games with. It's like, oh, this is what I'm doing right now. And that means that I can actually work with this stuff. But people have a lot of resistance to that kind of shit because if you're not playing ego games with the Enneagram, now I actually have to work on myself. And no one wants to do that.
Right,
totally.
So here's kind of an anecdote, just on more observing myself kind of thing. Like, I feel like in the places that really matter, like in my relationship, for example, being a social type, I can like work on the 9 stuff, right? Because the stakes are like high, and so I need to do it. So like I can fight with John, and I can, protect my boundaries, and I can advocate for myself and stuff like that. And sometimes it falls off, but whatever. But what's been really interesting to observe lately is me in particular, I get extremely 9 at work for some reason. And I see the just like flat blank 9 that I like. For example, there's this, I can't decide if he's a 2 or 7. It's like so much heart energy, but also so much like chaotic nonsense that I don't know what his type is, but whatever. He's annoying. That's all I know. And I'm really sitting rude at reception. Sorry. I'm transcending 9 again now.
It's the 5 wing on that 6 fix.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'm like sitting at my desk, and I'm like not tucked away in a corner. I'm just like out in the open, which is like my least favorite place to be. And so this guy who works with me, he works on the floor, and basically whenever he wants a break, he just comes and sits next to me.
Oh God.
And and he'll just talk at me, and he'll like completely hijack the conversation to somehow like, give me an illustration on how he's like God's handpicked angel, or how he's just like some super interesting person. And the point of this is because I observe myself in the moment, just go like, what's that animal that plays dead, a possum or something, right?
Yeah.
I observe myself do that where suddenly I'm like, I know that I'm interesting. I know that we could have a conversation, but I cannot muster the will to push him to shut up.
No.
I also can't tell him to leave me alone. So what I end up doing is I see myself just go completely flat. I see myself just become just like a nothing person in hopes that like me giving him the most boring affect of all will make him go away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been an interesting thing to see. Like, that's not a high stakes situation. That's nothing that's going to change my life. That's, you know, whatever. But that's still an area of opportunity where I could sort of go to 3 and advocate and be like, yeah, I need to get work done. I need you to go have your lunch somewhere else. And for some reason, that's just a super difficult place for me to apply myself. So just, I don't know. That's just like another thing in, you know, I've now lived in New York for over a year, and mustering up the energy and the will and the whatever to not just make the move from Florida, but then to like reacclimate myself was very difficult and very painful, but I still did it.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't I tell this guy to fuck off? You know what I mean?
Real. Yeah.
So it's the thing of like your type challenges will be big or small everywhere, always. And it's kind of fun to observe them in the big and the small ways. Like, yes, treat the big ones, but treat the small ones too, because in a way, because they don't matter, maybe it's just my 9 speaking, but like in a way, because they don't matter, that's why you should address them.
Totally. It's like training wheels for real shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and
So
you know,
annoying.
yeah. And like the 9th thing is even to like let things slide, you know? So it's like, oh,
Right.
but this is not a high stakes situation.
Right.
So I
Right,
don't need
yeah,
to
yeah.
show up. And no, that's great.
Yeah, so weird. It's like when things matter, I will show up. It could just also be a situation that I know John wants me fully, so maybe it's more attachment nonsense. And whereas this guy at work clearly just wants like a blank palette to just talk at. So who knows? I'll report back on my findings, but that's what I'm observing in the current time of why Alexandra's a 9 with a 5 wing on her 6 fix.
Like even for me, like I'm just observing the wall and how unintentional and reflexive it is. Even when I want to be in a space of I want to emotionally connect with somebody, an unexpected emotional opportunity for emotional connection arises, and there's no piercing through. I'm watching that happen. Where it's like there is no one here for you to touch, and then it's like I have to come back around and like try to actually reach back and be like, oh, I actually wanted to connect with you in that way, but I'm watching, like, even though I have the intention and I'm a lot better at this than I used to be, that reflexive wall is a bitch, man. Like it's still there. And so if someone approaches me with some kind of unexpected reach out into my heart, the chances of me being able to reciprocate in the moment are pretty much almost 0. Like it's just a reflexive no. And then I can maybe like, all right, I actually wanted, you know, then I have to like open up, and just watching that happen is like, Jesus.
No, totally. I mean, yeah, for me, like how quickly something comes up and then my whole world is absolute emotional despair. Like suicidal despair is just incredible how fast it is. Like I get a little, like my imagination goes, oh, what about that? And then it's like,
yeah.
And I'm not reachable, and there's anger, you know, there's frustrated anger, and yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
Doesn't stop.
Never
It doesn't
stops.
stop. I think, John, you'd ask something about like,
Won't
yeah, I think you'd ask something on the Courtney calls, like, you know, if me recognizing had given me any ability to be able to step back from it. And in the moment, I was like, this feels so impossible. I mean, I'm seeing it now, but like it feels like it's going to take years before I can even pull the grip away from this sort of reflexive thing that's happening. I'm seeing how reflexive it is, and it's so disappointing because it's like, oh shit, this is like built into everything. So I guess the answer to that is that I'm seeing how much intentional work I would have to do to even get like 10%, you know, away from the reflex. Because it's just a first response.
Yeah. You know, like, I mean, keeping our misery close, like we said earlier, is like one of the, like, we have to like get sick of what we're doing. Like, you have to just like get sick. Like, I think that's the only way to really change it, is to just like be nauseated by the pattern and like how I feel when I'm going down that road or something, or you know, conversely, like, there are ways to not indulge, and then there might be ways to like, that I know from my own personality structure, to find stability and like follow those, you know, there's like, sometimes there's holes in the personality that need to be filled in certain ways. But yeah, it's like finding when we go to sleep, however we go to sleep, and just like really observing and experiencing these sleep, instead of going like, let me get past the sleep.
Yeah.
Like, can I get sick enough of being in this space and really clear about what the body, heart, and mind effect are? I think
that's part of why it's so important to really emphasize the ugly and the hell.
Right.
You know, and to keep going further into it, like really push the dog's nose into the shit.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah.
That's the only way you'd be motivated to do anything about it. It's just, and that's why a lot of people quit the Enneagram, because, oh shit, it's hopeless, and there's such a big mountain to climb to pull myself out of this ditch that I'm realizing that I'm in. I've seen so many people quit the Enneagram because what they're seeing is so uncomfortable and so seemingly hopeless. But that's the only thing that would actually get you to peel yourself from this automatic reflex that's just imprisoning you. So anyway, we've been going for a while.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We'll see what I'll end up calling whatever the fuck this last hour and a half was.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, what is it? What do we call it?
Idealizations.
There's usually some kind of theme. It's like, I think one phrase that I used was just killing your idols.
Yeah.
There you go. That's good.
You know,
That's good.
Yeah, I like that.
I think it's good. All right. Well, my social batteries are out. We'll talk next week. I guess next week we're meeting around 1, and Nancy, hopefully we can get it to work. And my friend Julie will be on for Divine Feminine.
That's next Sunday?
Next Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, y'all.
All right.
Cool.
Okay.
Bye.
See y'all.